Chapter 23. A Nightmare of a Night.
Hunter, wake up!
I grumbled and rolled further into the couch, hoping the noise would go away. Lyra had recommended that I take a nap before the haunted hayride, just to ease my nerves. She noticed how jittery I was becoming as tonight drew closer, and I was all too eager to agree. Unfortunately, most of my rest was spent fending off nightmares. It wasn't until recently that they finally settled.
Hunter!
The voice persisted. A hoof pressed on my back and gave me a small shove.
You need to get up. The festival's going to start soon.
I grumbled again and opened up a tired eye. Bonbon's blurry figure appeared horizontally before me. My second eye opened and her image became sharper. Two fangs protruded from the corners of her lips. All right, I yawned. Give me a sec. I pushed myself up and swung my legs back off of the couch. My head was murky from the rest, so I shook it until I had a firmer grip on reality. Where's Lyra?
She left a while ago to pick Sweetie Belle up from the boutique,
Bonbon explained.
She asked me to wake you up before the Nightmare Night Festival.
She told me she was going to wake me up herself before she left. I rubbed away the last of the sleep from my eyes. Thanks, though. Is the face paint still in the bathroom?
Should be right where you left it.
She nodded.
Do you need any help with it? I remember you said you've never really used it before, and I'd hate for you to be tardy getting your costume on.
I hesitated. Yeah, that would probably be really smart, actually. You're a bit more of an expert on this stuff than I am.
A little more complicated than dresses, isn't it?
She teased. Somewhere between that and saddles, I added without missing a beat. There was a pause, and Bonbon snorted. With a contagious smile and a shake of her head, she began retreating back into the kitchen, where a sweet aroma was beginning to waft from.
Go ahead and get started,
she said with a chuckle.
I need to check on the sweets. No telling when the fools will start knocking. I'll be up there in a bit.
I allowed myself a quick stretch as I stood and began my march up the stairs. Each step helped jar my head just enough to shake away whatever drowsiness I still had. The light was left on in the bathroom, and the chair I had carried up earlier in the morning was still in the corner where I had left it. I pulled it up to the sink, where an array of makeup and brushes sat patiently and set to work. Bonbon had given me tips the other night on how to start. It wouldn't be too difficult, she claimed, trying to make myself pale as the undead, but should I manage to mess up, a few errors and discolorations would probably work in my favor. I started at the base of my neck, hiding away any traces of life with a layer of gray paint, and worked my way up. Before long, Bonbon appeared next to me in the mirror and offered to cover the back of my neck and add a few extra details. A touch of blue and some splashes of red created new bruises and gouges, and soon the only sign that I hadn't died from a tragic accident was the life still shining brightly in my eyes. Wow, you're actually really good with this, I commented as she added one last shade beneath my jawline.
Thanks.
She plucked the brush out of her teeth and tried again.
Thanks. I ran a face painting booth on Nightmare Night for a while. Most of the time, fools just wanted something simple like a manticore or a rodent, but every now and then, somebody wanted something a little more sinister.
Well, color me impressed, I added as the corpse in the mirror mimicked my movements. I think you really outdid yourself. Bonbon allowed herself a proud smile.
I appreciate the praise. Now up you go. Count Bonbon needs a few finishing touches herself, and you need to hurry to the festival. I'm sure they're going to start the hayride any moment now.
My heart nearly skipped a beat as I glanced at the clock. She was right. I darted out of the bathroom and made it halfway down the stairs before remembering something on my mental checklist. Doubling back up the stairs, I jogged into Lyra's room, where my hatchet waited for me on the nightstand. In spite of everyone's assurance that the path through the Everfree was safe, I couldn't shake the dread of returning to that forsaken forest. My hatch had offered me a small comfort, knowing I had survived for so long with it since the beginning. As I tethered it to the rope belt around my jeans and its familiar weight tugged against my waist, I felt a burden lift from my chest, and a part of me felt as though I had regained a sliver of control. With one final check on Lyra's personal mirror, I set out to leave the house. "All right, I'm heading out," I called out to Bonbon.
All right, be careful, Hunter,
She replied from the bathroom.
have fun.
I opened the door and entered the darkening streets of Ponyville. With the sun retreating behind the hills on the horizon and its last rays of light dying out, the shadows of the town began to stretch, beckoning the creatures of the night into its cold streets. Everyone, young and old, was in costume, ranging from bedsheet ghosts to juggling clowns to even other bloodied zombies. The decor for the festival seemed to now be in full effect. Silly-looking spiders looked much more real in the shadows, and the cobwebs had a better impression in the moonlight. Games were strewn all across Ponyville, centered mostly within the town square, attracting most of the kids who weren't too busy harvesting candy. Many of the adults had gathered before a stage with a live band performing. Some outdoor snacks were supplied near the stage, and I thought I saw Applejack managing them. I remembered the last time I had been near so many desserts, though, and with a smile, I decided it was best to not take a short detour this time. My faint smile was short-lived, however. As I entered the park and the number of ponies began to dwindle, there was little to take my mind away from the everfree forest that loomed on the other side. Its dark trees swayed in the sun's dying light with the breeze, making it appear more alive than it had any right to. Despite my friend's constant assurances that all would be well, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my gut that something would go wrong. The carriage I would be spending the next few hours with waited for me at the edge of the forest, along with the silhouettes of the other volunteers. My heart lifted when I recognized Zecora hiding beneath a burlap cloak, but it sank just as quickly when I saw the rest. Tufts of puffy pink hair peel out of the jaws of a bright green alligator that hopped excitedly around the carriage. Pinky's demeanor had been steadily improving since the party a week ago, so much so that I almost preferred her when she was moping. She was relentless in her crusade to make everything up for me, and though my friends didn't mind receiving the sweets she had given to me for free, I couldn't help but dread whatever she might have had in store for tonight. A mummified Macintosh was settling into the reins of the carriage, aided by an all-too-familiar and colorful Pegasus. I realized the last time I had seen the stallion was long before I came to stay in Ponyville, even longer since we last spoke, and those words were as cold as the air tonight. With one exception, I made a point of not visiting Sweet Apple Acres, mostly out of guilt or embarrassment. I was convinced it was sheer luck that his sister and I were able to bury the hatchet so well, and I could only hope that Applejack had been able to put in a few good words for me since. Most of Rainbow's mane was stuffed away beneath a pith hat as she worked to help Macintosh with his harness, and one of her wings was bandaged and pinned against an olive green vest. I couldn't help but frown. Not much had changed between us since the party, aside from the fact that she now too seemed to be avoiding me at all costs. A part of me assumed that it was due to her confession that we still hadn't spoken of since the party, and I began to wonder if she even knew that I would be here. I paused before meeting the group. One person was missing, the same one responsible for orchestrating this event. Where was...
Hail, Hunter Grey!
A voice like thunder boomed next to me, and I nearly jumped out of my own skin. I doubled over in an attempt to calm my beating heart, which was pounding so hard it threatened to leap from my chest.
Oh, forgive my excitement, Hunter,
Princess Luna continued, this time in a much more acceptable volume.
'Twas not my intent to frighten you.
Startled! I squeaked out, trying and failing to salvage my dignity. I sucked in a deep breath and stood back up, only to sigh it out as Zecora and Pinky giggled to each other. Just startled me, I insisted. The princess had a playful smile as she passed me, and I slowly followed in tow as she approached the group.
Now that every pony is here, the merriment shall finally commence. Do we all remember our parts?
Yeah, I nodded as we all formed a circle around the carriage. Macintosh and I are in charge of getting everyone into the forest and dropping them off.
From where we take our gathered creatures of the night and lead them through the forest maze of fright,
Zecora added.
Where myself and some of my guards will be waiting to give the foals a quick scare before they are sent back to Ponyville.
Princess Luna finished contently.
And not to worry, Hunter. I have plenty of guards watching over the trails both leaving and returning to Ponyville, and they know where I am. Should they believe for whatever reason that the forest is unsafe, they will let me know immediately, and the attraction shall close.
I released a breath I didn't know I was holding with her words. One last bit of encouragement didn't hurt my nerves. They were already on edge from being this close to the forest.
Now, let us embark on our adventure of mischief and fright,
she continued. She directed a hoof to Big Macintosh.
Macintosh, art thou ready to proceed?
Yep.
Then let us entertain the masses.
A small cheer broke out from the group, and Pinky grabbed Rainbow Dash and pulled her out towards the town.
Come on, Dashy! The sooner we gather some falls, the sooner we can start!
Rainbow Dash chuckled fiendishly.
Yeah, and the sooner we get to give him a scare. Oh, do I have some ideas.
Zecora smiled to herself and followed after them. I only wished I could share her enthusiasm. With the mystery chaperones revealed, tonight was bound to be a test of my nerves. As Macintosh wheeled the carriage around and left me and the princess alone, I cleared my throat to grab her attention. Princess? I coughed. If you don't mind me asking.
Not at all, Hunter Grey,
she replied, facing me with curiosity.
Please, what troubles you?
I struggled to find the right words to say. Well, it's just... Why Rainbow and Pinky? I asked bluntly. Not to insult you or anything if this was your call, but we're still not exactly on the best of terms. Her faint smile faded away, and she nodded solemnly.
Ah, yes. I am aware, she confessed. Pardon me, Hunter, I meant not to deceive you if those are your thoughts, but there are few I trust more than them. My original intention was to bring Twilight Sparkle. However, I was told the relations between the two of you are much more volatile.
She paused as if to study me for any reaction. I didn't look her in the eyes. It had been a long time since I'd seen Twilight, even just around the town. I couldn't have been more grateful for the fact, but it did little to help my festering thoughts whenever she was brought up.
Besides, it would appear as though she would have been unable to come regardless,
Princess Luna continued.
She was far too busy with a project tasked by my sister, though I fear her deadline is fast on approach.
Project? I frowned.
So it would seem. But it is not my place to speak of it. Perhaps you could ask her yourself.
She left her comment open, seeking for a response. But in my following silence, she accepted that I wasn't going to continue to pry.
Very well,
she conceded.
I suppose it is time for me to hide. Please remember, though, Hunter, this is a time for enjoying yourself. Do not allow your thoughts of Pinky and Rainbow to steal from the merriment. All will be well. Now, where did I put those fangs? Ah, there they are.
She put a pair of plastic vampire teeth in her mouth and moved her jaw experimentally.
Until next time, Hunter Grey. Fare thee well.
As she trotted towards the forest, her body was illuminated by a brilliant white light. After I blinked the flash away, I was surprised to find that the princess was gone. A much taller pony with a jet black coat and a blue ethereal mane stood in her place. White specks floated freely inside her mane as if underwater, Blue armor covered her hooves, a crescent moon marked her mantle, and a slick blue helmet covered her head. She paused at the edge of the tree line and gave me a quick wink and a smile before entering. I stood dumbfounded for a moment, and an impressed chuckle escaped me. Now that was a costume. Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and Zecora managed to corral an impressive crowd for the ride, and it wasn't just foals. Some mares and stallions that seemed to be looking for a good scare too. I swallowed the lump forming in my throat and climbed into the carriage. For a moment, I couldn't tell what I was more nervous of. The Everfree or the crowd. Throughout the night, the ponies boarded the carriage in groups of 8, and the chaperones took rotating turns watching over them. Zecora was the only break I had for my sanity, and I felt more at ease when she was in the carriage with me. We were able to play off of each other and set the atmosphere together, preparing the other ponies for their long march back to Ponyville. After her would always follow Rainbow Dash in the next group, and our chemistry couldn't have been any more of a stark contrast. We hardly spoke, but the ambient sounds of the forest were able to pick up our slack and put the ponies on edge. I could tell she wanted to be in the carriage with me no more than I wanted to be in it with her. I had the opposite problem with Pinkie. She couldn't quit talking. It wouldn't have been nearly as much of a problem if she could remember that the point of the ride was to scare them. She was too much of a comedian, yet oddly enough, whenever I saw her groups emerge from the forest as I waited for the next to load up, they always seemed to be screaming the most. Maybe it was just luck. We were deep into the night, and so far every ride had gone without a hitch. My paranoia of the forest slowly died with every safe return, and the hatchet that rested lazily against my waist felt lighter and lighter because of it. The foals were enjoying themselves, the adults were enjoying themselves, even I was enjoying myself. I had lost track of how many groups we had run through. Pinkie Pie was currently chaperoning a smaller group of 6, of which only 1 was an adult. As usual, she spoke more than enough for both of us, but near the end she began complaining about a sharp pain in her knees. She kept stealing confused glances behind us as though she were expecting something to be there, only to return to massaging and complaining once again. "My humble apologies, fillies and colts, but I'm afraid this is as far as we take you," I announced, reciting the lines Zecora and I had been working on the last few rotations. Pinkie hopped off the carriage and herded everyone else off. "You are going to have to take the rest of this journey on hoof. Beware of the creatures that lurk in the shadows, and stay close together. It would be such a pity to lose one of you." The foals were shaking like a leaf, their eyes darting to any shadow that moved in the cold midnight breeze. "Until we meet again," I called as Big Macintosh turned the carriage around. "That is, if you survive." Macintosh reared up on his hind legs and sprinted forward, carrying us away from the terrified foals. We raced through the Everfree, the cold wind feeling like sharp pinpricks against my face. Only when we broke through the tree line did we slow down. "Hey, good job again, man," I praised him as we wheeled around to the next group. "Need a break or anything? You've been going nonstop all night." "Nope." I winced a bit. He hadn't spoken much all night, save for the few single-word responses. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking about, especially towards me. I tried to push it out of my mind, though. It was going to be a long enough night as it was without worrying if Macintosh and I had buried the proverbial hatchet. There was a large line eagerly awaiting for their turn on the haunted hayride. Zecora stood patiently at the front, flanked by the next group of passengers. As Big Macintosh brought us to a stop, she helped some of the younger foals onto the carriage. I scanned the crowd of costumed ponies, and something felt missing. "Zecora, where's Rainbow?" I asked. The Pegasus wasn't anywhere in sight. Neither was her party of foals. She should have returned by now.
Her exact location? I am not sure. Perhaps she is taking a small detour,
Zecora offered. This is the third time, I groaned. I have a mind to tell her off next time I see her.
She is giving the fool some extra fright,
Zecora pointed out.
After all, this is her favorite night. Just give her another minute or two, and I'm sure she will come back from the blue.
I huffed and looked back at the waiting ponies. There was nothing that could be done about it. Rainbow did seem to take some twisted pleasure in going the extra mile to frighten everyone in her groups. All I could do was run this group through the forest and hope she was back when I returned. With a shake of my head, I returned my attention back to the new group. Zecora was helping the last foal in, and there was no point in waiting any longer. All right, Mac, looks like they're all in. Let's cut a trail. The carriage lurched forwards as Macintosh started pulling. As we neared the forest, I gave the crowd one last look, hoping Rainbow would get over herself and arrive on time for once. But as we entered the trees, she was still nowhere to be seen. The canopy of branches strangled the moonlight trying to reach us. Our only reliable source of light was the lantern that shook and swayed with the carriage. Most of the ride had been completed in silence, which was unnatural for me and Zecora. She must have noticed my head was somewhere else. So, have you kids been enjoying yourselves this frightful night? I asked the group, trying to keep my mind on track.
Totally!
A colt dressed loosely like a conquistador exclaimed.
This is one of the best nightmare nights so far. I got so much candy, I can make it last for weeks.
I stole a glance back and found him proudly displaying a small bucket filled to the brim. Zecora chuckled fondly to herself and leaned forward, allowing the lantern light of the carriage to mark her face with deep shadows.
My, so impressive you'd gathered so many sweets this soon, she said hauntingly. I am sure they will make an excellent gift to Nightmare Moon.
The colt gulped and held his treasure closely against his barrel.
Do you really think... Is Nightmare Moon really here?
Oh, there's all manners of beasts and monsters out tonight, I commented. Far more than I've ever seen in my time here. There's no telling what you might find hiding in the trees. The little conquistador began shaking in his boots, wound so tightly that he might have jumped at the slightest "ooh." The carriage hit a divot in the path, and with the sudden jump, the foal snapped. With a squeal, he sent his bucket of candy into the air, and we all watched as it sailed before falling far behind us.
My candy!
Hey, calm down, I said, covering the distance and grabbing him as he tried to clamber over the railing. With a poorly stifled chuckle, I set the colt back down and called to the front of the carriage. Macintosh, slow down a bit. We have some sweets overboard. As the carriage began to slow to a halt, I placed my foot against the back rail and hopped off. A small chill came over me. This was the first time my feet had touched the ever-free soil in a long time. Just grab the candy and get back to the cart, I told myself. I could just barely see the bucket at the edge of the carriage's lantern light. Behind me, the ponies whispered ominously, but the deafening silence of the forest threatened to drown them out in my ears. Weren't there crickets before? And owls and small rodents, too? My hatchet began weighing heavily against my side, but I didn't dare touch it and verify my paranoia. My hands couldn't move fast enough as I dropped to a knee and scooped the lost candy back into the bucket. There was probably more dirt than candy shoveled back in during my haste. As the last gumdrop fell into the bucket, I snapped back up to my feet and rushed back to the cart. As I left, I could have sworn I heard a noise, and I froze stiff. The forest was still. Even the ponies in the carriage had stopped speaking to eye me with concerned curiosity. I felt my hand reach down, ever so slowly, and grip my hatchet just beneath its cold head. My ears strained to hear the sound again. Any sound, to deny the suspicion growing like a lump in my throat. A second passed. A minute. There was a cough, ragged and strained. It couldn't have been from an animal, but that only helped my nerves so much. Why was someone hiding off the beaten path of the trail?
Hunter?
My eyes flicked back to the carriage. Zecora looked like she was about to climb out after me. I held out a hand to stop her and moved cautiously to the brush.
Don't pretend to be naive, Hunter.
A voice whispered in the back of my head. I dropped the bucket at my feet and pulled the hatchet out of its makeshift sheath.
You know firsthand how dangerous this place can be.
Someone there? I asked quietly. I almost heard a word, but it was quickly cut off by another fit of coughs deeper into the trees. I held my hatchet close to my chest, and my free hand pushed aside the brush. Zecora called my name once more as I delved deeper into the Everfree. The infrequent coughing became my guide as I slowly crept further into the trees. I thought I could hear a faint thrashing sound in between. For a moment, the noises fell silent, and I began to worry that I had lost the source. I gathered my nerves and offered one more call as I pushed aside the brush in front of me. Hello? A wet cough sounded next to me. My eyes snapped to the noisemaker, and I nearly jumped when I saw the mangled guard lying under a tree. He looked as though he had gotten into a fight with a bear and lost. Dozens of claw marks glinted across his mantle in the moonlight. His hind leg was shredded and covered in bites, and his leathery wings were tattered beyond use, staining his armor crimson. The dark helmet on his head was dented, and its plume was disheveled. A dark stream ran down his face, its source hidden beneath the helmet. His forelegs were wrapped tightly around a knot of roots clustered around his torso. And the roots began to snarl and shift. The guard's eyes fluttered open and landed on me. His breathing became more labored as he struggled to inhale through the wolf's jaws clamped around his neck. He moved his lips to make words, but all that came out were wet coughs and weak grunts. He closed his eyes, took in a deep, ragged breath, and shouted at the top of his strained lungs.
There's more! Run!
Ice raced through my veins. Two sickly yellow eyes glared at me from the guard's neck, and with a snarl it clamped tighter and thrashed. My mind was in overdrive. My body couldn't interpret the torrent of orders my brain was screaming at it. Only as a branch snapped next to me did my legs finally decide to work. I raced through the trees as fast as I could. A ragged panting chased after me, accompanied by that accursed growl I had hoped I would never hear again. A shadow flashed to my left. I barely caught the mangled silhouette of a timber wolf. My heart pounded like a drum. My eyes were darting for some sign of familiarity while I sprinted. I couldn't have been too far away from the trail. Maybe if I just took this next turn. I broke through the trees and fought against my momentum to stop. The carriage was off to my side, its passengers staring at me with confused and worried eyes. I heard the Timberwolf growling again, and another chill washed over me. "We need to get out of here, now!" I yelled as I raced to the ponies. The foals were beginning to panic. As I dashed to the front, I could hear them murmur amongst themselves in hushed, frightened voices. "I said now, damn it! Move your ass, Mac!" The large stallion was about to protest, but as he turned to glare at me, his eyes widened at something behind me. I barely had time to get in the carriage by the time he sprinted away with it. The carriage was in chaos. The foals were shrieking for Macintosh to run faster, and Zecora was trying vainly to calm them down. I was trying desperately to anchor my mind to the rest of my body. We were going the wrong way, I realized with horror. Macintosh had never had a chance to turn around. We were going deeper into the ever-free forest. I dared to steal a glance of our pursuers. A pair of timber wolves, not too far behind, were keeping pace with us and inching closer ever so slowly. Their wild, luminescent eyes were trained on me, and their rabid barks were only rivaled by the foal's screams. Sooner or later, they were going to catch us. Macintosh would tire out eventually from the weight of the carriage and its passengers, and we would all be dead meat within minutes. Unless Macintosh had a diversion. Hey, get ready to turn around, I called over his pounding hooves.
Don't do it. You will get yourself killed.
I stood from the front of the carriage, struggling to keep my balance on the uneven path. Look, I'm still trying to convince myself to do this. You're not helping.
Good. It's a horrible plan.
It spat in my head. If I don't do this, everyone will get killed, I argued, carefully stepping past the ponies to the back. It's me they're after. Hunter, what do you think you're doing? Zecora called after me. My foot was already at the edge of the carriage. I twisted around and our eyes met. My heart hesitated.
What horrible plan are you brewing?
You do not owe them anything,
the voice persisted.
It was their plan to come out here in spite of your warnings. Let them reap what they have sown.
My body was shaking harder than the carriage. I thought I was going to throw up. I couldn't tear my eyes away from Zecora, who kept shaking her head and mouthing the same word over and over. Don't. It took all my willpower to close my eyes and look back to our pursuers. There were only two of them. I could keep them busy for a while.
You said it yourself. You're not a hero.
Shut up, I hissed. My body tensed forward. Of the two wolves, one was much smaller and scrawnier than the other. The larger wolf might have had a harder time coming to a stop if I surprised them. My hatchet jumped anxiously in my hand, and my nervous mind couldn't quell it. I told myself I had to do this, that there was no other way. I told myself I could take them, that I would survive and meet back with Zecora and all the other foals I would save once this was done. No matter how many lies I told myself, though, I couldn't believe them. And second thoughts were beginning to chip away at my resolve. My broken nerves festered inside, until I let them out with a frightened shout. The wolves never saw it coming, and to be fair, neither did I. I leapt out of the carriage and twisted my body, bringing both of my feet forward to meet the scrawnier wolf's muzzle. There was a sickening crunch as its wooden frame snapped and caved slightly inwards. My unguarded back slammed into the dirt after the sudden collision, and I was left gasping for breath. Zecora cried out my name as I sped off, but it was too late. My fate was sealed. The larger wolf fought against its momentum to stop and double back. The wolf I struck whimpered as golden sap poured from its broken muzzle, and it shook its head wildly to dispel the pain. I had a short moment to recover, and I rolled onto my feet, hatchet at the ready. The larger wolf was barreling towards me, barking like a rabid dog, and I readied myself to challenge it. I lurched forward to meet it and swung my hatchet. The wolf was charging into its path, and the swing should have connected. But at the last second, it pivoted on its forelegs and darted off the path and back into the trees. I stumbled in surprise, my eyes pinned on the brush it disappeared into, but I did not have to wait long before it showed itself again. Further down the path, my target reappeared, its sickly eyes pinned on me as it trotted across the path. I took a few steps after it, and it responded with a snarl as it retreated back the same distance and resumed its trotting. What was it waiting for? I heard my answer before I had much time to react. The scrawny wolf I had left behind was sprinting towards my open back. It sank its teeth into my left shoulder, and the sudden weight caused me to drop to one knee. Its splintered teeth pierced through my clothing and into my muscle, and as it thrashed its head along my shoulder, I couldn't restrain my pained cry. In my shock, I nearly forgot about the wolf before me, and it had already taken its window to charge once more. Something told me this time wouldn't be a fake-out, though. My hatchet was lying on the cold earth by my foot. I must have dropped it in my surprise, but there wasn't enough time to scoop it up and defend myself. The wolf had stooped low, and its eyes were focused on something beneath mine. It lunged upward, jaws wide, and I instinctively threw my left arm between it and my throat, ignoring the pain in my shoulder. The larger wolf clamped its teeth around my wrist, and the force of its leap nearly pinned it to my throat. We were eye to eye, and its was filled with such a primal aggression. Its claws began scratching at my body, and the coolness of the air was chased away as skin broke and released streams of burning crimson. My vision blurred with a sudden, splitting headache.
What were you thinking?
The voice boomed in my head. I winced as the larger wolf began to tear deeper into my arm.
Bad timing.
I growled.
Less yelling, more helping.
One of the claws raised up high. I watched helplessly as it fell down upon my brow and tore downwards. For a moment, the only thing that could drown the wolf's snarling was my own screaming. Its claws anchored it into my chest, and the larger wolf began to pull. The mind-numbing pain was beginning to spread through my arm. Though I was already half blind, my vision began to tunnel around it. No, this was not going to be the end, not like this. I pulled my right hand away from my bleeding arm and swung it back as a fist to meet the larger wolf's head. It connected on its side, and I could feel the skin scrape away at the knuckles against the wooden frame, and wooden teeth shake in my arm. I reared back and punched again, and again, and again. My bones cracked and crunched against its temple, and soon all of the pain was rewarded. It recoiled away, releasing my arm in the process, and with my newfound freedom, I reached over to grab my hatchet and drove it into the beast's side. For once, it was the wolf's turn to yelp. As I pulled the hatchet from its side, it crumpled onto the path. I could feel its friend's teeth sink deeper into my shoulder in response, and the claws in my back were beginning to break skin. I threw my blade over my shoulder where its head should have been and heard it strike. Its teeth dug deeper into my shoulder on impact, and I winced. A second passed, though, and the rest of it became limp. Up ahead, a rumbling echoed along the path. With my fading vision, I thought I could see a light shaking wildly, and before it a figure galloping towards me. The carriage. I slowly stood up on my feet, shrugging the scrawnier wolf's carcass off my back. My head felt light, but still I had a plan. My feet carried me away from the carriage as it drew closer, slowly building up to a jog. If the ponies lent me a hand, I could probably hitch a ride back to Ponyville with them, and we could stop this ride and the entire festival before things got any more out of hand. The carriage was getting closer, and it was getting harder to keep my balance. Nevertheless, I held out a hand in the hope someone would take it as they passed.
Hunter, watch out!
Something tore into my right calf and pulled back, and I fell from the sudden jerk to a halt. The carriage thundered by as I slammed into the earth. My last hope of an easy salvation gone in an instant. I glared behind me and found the beast responsible. The larger wolf had recovered, though sap was pouring freely from its side. Something between a sigh and a growl escaped me. Its teeth were sunk into my right leg, and it was obvious it wasn't going to let go anytime soon. I reared back my left leg and ran my heel between its eyes, biting back the pain as its teeth dore deeper into my skin. Damn it! Let go! I growled, punctuating myself with another stomp. Let go! Let go! Let go! Let go! With one final kick, the Timberwolf's head caved in. My foot became wedged into the hole it created, and sap began pouring into my shoe. My body was exhausted, and I felt like I was on the brink of passing out. But I did it. The air was still. Not even a cricket dared to break the silence. And in spite of the ache that blanketed my body, I found a reason to smile. And you said I couldn't do it. I chuckled weakly.
Yes, we did. And you almost died trying to prove us wrong.
Almost, I pointed out, rolling over to see the stars. I hissed as the claw marks on my back pressed against the ground. Almost, but didn't.
Stop pretending that this is a game!
The voice shouted in my head.
How many more times are you going to throw your life away just to prove a point?
I sat up in spite of my body's protests, my hands clamped against the sides of my head as though it would stop it from spinning. Shut up, I spat in frustration. My friends were in danger. What else was I supposed to do?
Your friends are safe, just as they always have been, but still they worry about young Hunter Gray, who went missing on his family's camping trip. For all they know, you're dead, and you've been trying your best to prove those rumors true.
Leave them out of this, I growled, climbing to my feet.
Someone has to bring them into this,
it retaliated.
It seems as though you've forgotten about them. You should be focusing on staying alive, not playing hero for a bunch of animals.
Fuck, get out! I staggered forward. The world seemed to tilt as the headache continued. The forest path dimmed as the moon hid away from our argument behind a cloud. I could barely make out the trees ahead of me. Which way did Zecora go? Was it still behind me?
Where do you think you are going? Do you think this is something you can walk away from?
I'm finding Zecora, I growled. At least you seem to shut up whenever there's someone else to talk to.
And what will you do when you find her?
It demanded.
Prepare to play martyr again?
Maybe I will, I snapped. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just enjoy the peace and quiet in my own head whenever she and the others are around. I swear, everything became so much better when my delusional ass finally had someone else to talk to.
You would be dead twice over without our help,
it retaliated.
You were unprepared for this world. You gladly listened to anyone or anything that could offer you guidance, and our plans only started to fail when you began making decisions for yourself. Now that there are ponies and princesses and pretending friends, you became soft and misguided. You let them become your crutch.
Why don't you say that to my face? I shouted to the trees. Its voice grew softer and dark, coming out as if a growl.
Why don't you say it to ours?
I whipped around, fist raised to strike something I knew wouldn't be there. But as the moon peeked out from behind a stray cloud and softly illuminated the path, I could have sworn I saw a face in the darkness, with eyes of stone sculpted into a furious glare. The headache snapped away, along with the rest of my consciousness. And the last thing I felt before falling to dreamless sleep was collapsing into the unforgiving earth.